I had to make this video because I've traveled over 40 states by myself. And when I went through the whole human trafficking awareness thing in 2018, well, it's from 2017 through 2019, I was working with several human rights and sex trafficking groups while the Harvey Weinstein and the Jeffrey Epstein cases came out on the news. I believe fundamental religion is tied to human trafficking and is kind of the root of why women don't have equality still, because we've been brainwashed and programmed by these 3,000-year-old religions that were meant to take women's power away. Digging into the word testimony, when we have the Bible, the New Testament and the Old Testament, testament and testimony actually come from the Latin word testes, which is a third member of the body, a third party member. So basically these words are basically saying that if you don't have a penis, your word isn't anything. You really don't have a right to say anything at all, which is really implicitly, not explicitly, stating that women are not even worth anything, which is why it took over 100 women in Harvey Weinstein's case for anybody to listen. And these women went to the police in Hollywood, and the police did not take reports. I had to make a video tonight because the Harvey Weinstein movie called She Said is coming out tomorrow. It was, on one hand, nice to see sex trafficking become a mainstream topic, but on the other hand, it was very disheartening to see that only 2 people were being blamed for a fundamental problem that is embedded in the United States everywhere, in every city probably, and people do not want to know about it or hear about it. I'm going to get into this, and I'm going to cover the fundamental religious origins of sex trafficking. So in Islam, there's people say Islam, there's a lot of Islamic countries that have laws that make a woman's word worth 1/2 of a man's. And it comes from a verse in the Quran, a verse that says, "And get 2 witnesses out of your own men. And if there are not 2 men available, then a man and 2 women, such as you agree for witnesses, so that if one of them, 2 women errs, the other can remind her." So basically, this verse is implying that women are not reliable, that you need 2 women because you can't trust them the same as men. Yeah, they're more likely to be at fault when they say something. And then we go to the Torah, and there's a question on Torah.org that says, do we trust a woman's testimony? Well, why would that, why is that something that's even asked in the first place? Are people basically segregating the entire male race or male sex and saying and asking if we trust men at all? Yeah, we probably are, but when it comes to legal things, it's like, why is that even a question of why a woman's testimony would not be worth as much as a man's? Is it true that according to the Torah, a woman can't be a witness in court, and why? And the answer from Rabbi Borak is that there are many legal scenarios in which a woman's testimony is believed on occasion, even in court. So basically he's saying that women's testimony is usually not believed, but there are some circumstances where it might be believed, which I don't see how that's any better than Islam, where they say that the Muslim society's attitudes range from completely rejecting female testimony in certain legal areas to conditionally accepting half worth that of a male, or with a requirement for a supporting male testimony, or to a complete accepting it without any gender bias. So that's the exact same scenarios in America. There's some places where people believe women. There's some places like Hollywood where you have to have 200 women say the same thing and the police won't even take record. They have to go to New York to have even any kind of court hearing or any kind of criminal justice. And there's certain parts where women's word is halfway validated. It's the same as the United States. I think because we live in a patriarchal society, it's these 3 religions are constantly trying to point the finger at the next religion and say, well, this religion treats women worse than our religion, so therefore we're good because that religion is bad, when in my opinion they're all bad, and trying to show how bad somebody else is or some other exterior practice in a country outside your own country. Trying to point the finger and show how bad it is there does not make your own community or your own country better. It just gives you a lower standard to compare yourself to. And so getting into Christianity, which I believe is just as bad as the other 2 religions that I mentioned, I get into testimony. I don't know, I'm not a legal I'm not legally trained, but I'm not sure how laws are written, if they're written with the word testimony in them. But testimony comes from the word testament. And if you think about it, the New Testament, the Old Testament, and the origin of this root is a Latin word. It comes from the Latin origin, testes, testicles, basically, testosterone. All of these words come from basically a third. Testes means a third member of the body. So basically, the wording in the entire Bible, and probably in some of our laws, even our language, is basically saying that if you don't have a penis, that your word is not even legitimate. You don't have a voice. That the only people that can have a voice are people with testes. And that's why, Mary Magdalene, the book of Mary Magdalene was found in Egypt. I think it was discovered 5 years ago. I'm not sure, by people who were trying to hide it because they were going to get murdered if they were caught with it. Because the Bible really just put all the women that had anything to say down, titled the most powerful woman, Mary Magdalene, off of her vagina, or not vagina, but labeled her a prostitute, so that they could invalidate everything she had to say and overly sexualize her and imply that nothing else she had involved in it other than sexual aspects was worth giving attention to. The entire Bible is based off of men being God, men being worth more than women, and men's testimony being the only word of God, the only true word of God. And anyone who is not brainwashed can see that the Bible is a very extremely patriarchal book that normalizes the ownership and the overly sexually objectifying women. So in our language, you get down to the basics of the language, testimony coming from the word testes, and it's easy to see when we repeat these words constantly, we get subliminally programmed by our own words to believe that people with penises have more of a right to speak up and say their truth than people without penises. It's crazy, but I know people don't think of it like that, but this is the truth. This is the origins of women being allowed to speak up versus men. Well, I don't like to say women versus men because I don't like to think like that, but really that's what this has become. That's what these fundamental religions have turned it into. So outwardly, women are taught that we can do anything a man can, as far as when it comes to our mind and our intellect. We can be the next president. Explicitly, we're taught that, but then we go home to these religions that tell us the opposite, basically, that only a man with penis word matters, and only men can testify, people with testes. I don't want to repeat myself, but it's ridiculous how patriarchal, even in the English language, which is why I would prefer, which is why they're trying to change the wording of certain laws. Maybe testify should not, that's a biblical term from testament. Maybe it should not be called testify. We're a patriarchal society. We don't look from within. And a matriarchal type of thinking would internalize or internally evaluate your own problems within your own community and country. And I think that's a huge problem in America. People are constantly being distracted by the media to look at exterior sources. Look at how bad it is there. Look at how bad they treat women in Arab countries. Well, if women are worth 1/2 of a man in Arab countries, I would take that over being worth 1/100th of a man in the United States. And there are areas in the United States where women are worth less than 1/2 of a man. And this is not explicitly stated in our laws, but it's implicitly practiced and normalized in our society. And I want to get this message out there that, women do not have equal rights in America. There are women being sex trafficked in America. When women are raped and sex trafficked and they go to the police and they try to report something, they are either ignored, or worse, they are silenced in a brutal ways. They're basically arrested and charged with crimes themselves through a manipulated warrant system, which I mentioned in my other videos. And so, yeah, what happened with the women that were involved in this case, when I researched it, was that a lot of them went to the police to try to file criminal charges in Hollywood, and the Hollywood police never even, from my understanding or what I researched, they did not even document one case of several women trying to file even a police report. I understand when it's one person's word against another's, you can have a lot of room for doubt, but when it's 100 people saying the same thing about one person, there's less and less doubt with every witness that you have that testifies about what actually happened to them. I won't use the word testify. I would prefer to speak up, because to speak up means it's the Germanic word speak is not, from what I researched, it was not a sexist word like the word testimony. I was infuriated when I watched videos of Matt Damon 4 years ago because they took these videos down. I can't find them anywhere on YouTube. But when I watched this video 3 or 4 years ago, Matt Damon was basically implying that the women were almost like at fault because they took cash payouts to be silent about this issue. And if they cared about justice, they wouldn't have done that. Because they took cash payouts for sex, that they were prostitutes. And that was so infuriating to me because the idea, when you don't have a choice, you're raped and you're sex trafficked, you have no say in the issue. So after the women found out that they were not, the police wouldn't validate what they had to say, they would not even consider going after Harvey Weinstein criminally, they went to the media because they felt like, hey, it's my duty to warn people about this person. And from my understanding, Harvey Weinstein bought out the media and then paid the women $100,000 for their silence. And at that point, the women had no choice. That was their only option because nothing was going to get done in either of those two areas with either the media or the police. And which is why they had to take Harvey Weinstein and criminally charge him in New York City, because Hollywood was so bad. And if you think about it, Hollywood is run by Jews. And I am not trying to specifically attack Jews because I think Christians are just as bad and so is Islam. But let's look internally within our own country and our own society and how we treat women before putting all these videos of the way they treat women in Africa and in the Middle East. Because some of the stuff that is happening there, actually a lot of it, almost all of that is going on in the United States. The only difference is that our government and our society doesn't want to look internally and take a look in the mirror and see what's actually going on. And it was the same thing with Jeffrey Epstein when he got caught. When his files were deleted apparently, and then he killed himself or whatever happened. We'll never know for sure, but a lot of the people involved in his sex trafficking empire were still alive, and the witnesses and the victims were still alive. And I don't like how they gave all these, like the FBI, and they gave all these investigators, which were men, a voice to say, well, we don't have any evidence anymore, we can't find it. Why didn't they bring forth the witnesses and the victims, which were all women, that would have said what had happened to them? You could have had the same thing that happened with Harvey Weinstein. You could have had 200 women or probably more pointing out who was involved in this extensive empire, but they didn't, and it was intentional because the royal family, politicians, famous actors, and probably tons of other rich people were involved in this whole thing. And, well, I'm going to go over my own personal experiences. So, yeah, when I tried to speak up about sex trafficking in certain parts of the country, they did try to jail me. And I mentioned that in other videos. And not only did they not care, not only did they not care to even document it, I had to have the same police that charged me with the felony for using pepper spray on this man. I had to have the women's advocacy group call him into the office and actually write a report for me, just take documentation of my side of the story, not just his. And when I read the police report of what happened, it made me want to kill myself. I wanted to throw up because it was basically it was all male police officers saying that because my story didn't match his story, that I was lying. And it was like, wow, I could not believe it. I had never before had even tried to call the police on and get any man in trouble or report a man for doing anything to me. And the first time I did, I was charged with a felony, and I had a very rude awakening. And then I talked to other women from that area, and they had similar stories. One woman that I befriended told me she had walked out of a bar drunk, and that a man just walked up to her and put his hands in her vagina. And she told me that she called the police and tried to report a sexual assault, but the reaction of the police was to send 6 all-male police officers surround her and threaten to arrest her for being drunk in public instead of take a report on the description and the incident in case it happens again and again and over and over and over again. And women aren't even asking that they criminally pursue all men that violate them. They just want documentation of it so that this person doesn't keep doing the same thing to other people. And so I do think that, the police should have options, or I don't know if it's the setup or the bias, like the misogynistic bias of the police against women in our society. I mean, it's definitely partly that, But I think it might be partly too because maybe when you take certain reports, you are required to file charges against somebody. And when you don't know for sure if it's someone, you can't do it. So there should be ways for the police to just put documentation of and write a woman's word down, just put what she has to say about it in case it happens to hundreds of other women. It's not that hard. Because these fundamental religions, the three Abrahamic religions of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, are all based on testes and only like a man's word mattering more than a woman's. Most, and they're more concerned with women being their property than women owning their own body and having a voice and taking control and power of their lives. And so our society still has prostitution laws. We are more concerned as a patriarchal society of if a woman is making money off of her sexuality versus if she's kidnapped, enslaved, and sex trafficked across the country, all over the country. And that just shows the patriarchy involved in the way human trafficking is handled. And I think if we lived in a less patriarchal world, we would have definitely less sex trafficking. I think we would have less slavery, but I'm not sure. I can't say that for sure. I'm kind of sick right now because I get sick whenever my family calls me. I grew up in a very extreme Christian family, very Catholic, and talking to them, it's like I get choked up because I believe this is kind of an energy where women, when they have their throat chakra blocked, it manifests. If you block anything in your body, it manifests into diseases. Like if you block your heart, you get heart disease. If you block your voice and you don't speak up, you get lung and throat problems. And I mentioned in my other video that I'm partly making these videos to heal. This is kind of like therapy for me too. It's like, this is kind of like therapeutic for me to make videos like this and just speak my truth.